Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Meet Me Nation. I'm your host Jeremy, and we're joined again by my co-host David Harrison. And we've got a really special guest today, college football campus tour, the man himself, Michael. Good to have you on board, man.
Jeremy, David, thank you guys for having me. I do podcasts every now and then, and there's certain fan bases that I've just been around a lot. And what you guys have done over the past few years, I followed your account for a long time. So this is a college football bucket list achievement to be on the podcast. So thank you.
Definitely, man. No, it's been crazy. I mean, I remember back when you followed us, you were like a smaller account, and you've just grown like crazy. And I think during the college football season, you were going to like multiple games a week. It was like you were the guy, and I don't think there's anybody else who's doing what you're doing.
I think there are guys that do it for a season, but I watched The Simpsons a lot back in the day, and Mr. Burns, he had a saying about being successful in business, and he said, "Friends, family, religion, these are the demons you must slay to be successful in business." And that's what I say about college football travel. Maybe you can talk to your family and take 3 or 4 months off and do it, but I've done it 7 years, and it's not easy to do that. But I always try to tell people, look, I'm going to be gone for 3 or 4 months, but the other 8 months, I'm going to be here, doing everything. So, but no, it's been great to grow. And like you said, we follow each other a long time ago. And I really love what UTSA is doing as a program.
We appreciate that, man. Yeah. So jumping right into it, how did college football campus tour start?
So I would say there was two things that kind of came together. My dad played college football back in the day. He played linebacker at a small school in California called University of Pacific. It's in Stockton. They play basketball. They dropped football in the mid 90s due to financial concerns. But, so growing up, always had college football on the brain. But really, I just wanted to travel the country. I hadn't traveled very much. So in 2017, I booked a trip to Colorado. I was going to stay at the Stanley Hotel. If you've ever seen the movie The Shining in the 80s with Jack Nicholson, that's the movie that the hotel that Stephen King stayed at and had the inspiration for the movie. Is supposed to be haunted. So on the way there was Colorado State. One of the best games my dad ever played was at Colorado State, 19 tackles and an interception as a middle linebacker. And so I visited both campuses. At the time, Colorado State was building Canvas Stadium. So saw a brand new stadium under construction. And then they each had bronze statues. At Colorado was a bronze Ralphie statue. At Colorado State, it was a bronze Ram statue. I had students take my photo next to the statue kind of to commemorate my visit. And when I got to the hotel, I really enjoyed those campus stops, and I did a little research, and Wyoming and Air Force were both within driving distance. And I decided, instead of staying at 2 nights at the hotel, do one, went to those, took a photo with the Falcon statue with the cowboy, and then we were off and running. Did some visits like to the 2 Arizona schools, the 2 Oregon schools, and then that fall started going to games. I felt like it was the natural progression. Did 13 in 2017, and then it just started to go from there.
Nice. Yeah. So, I mean, like, I know this past season, you've just been going crazy, multiple games a week. I mean, how do you manage that kind of schedule when you've only got, so much time?
So really the very first thing I do is look at the weeknight games, because there's only going to be 1 or 2 probably per day. And when you get into October, Conference USA, throughout the weeknight games, all of the month of October, that was new last year. In November is always MACtion. So you got the Tuesday, Wednesday games. And if you do it right, you can go to 6 games per week, which is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and 2 on Saturday. So I'm always looking for maybe a noon game and a 7 p.m. game. And if they're, hour or 2 apart. And then if you go to 6 per week and you times that by 4 weeks, you got 24 in a month. There's 3 months in the regular season, full months. So 24 times 3 is 72. And then you look at bowl games and conference championships and FCS playoffs and national championships. And I was able to, what I believe is, set a world record and go to 90 games last year.
Jeez, man.
Wow.
So as far as like the logistics of it, are you like driving to these games? I'm assuming you've got to be flying to most of them, right?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. So, I'm not a rich guy. I have savings. I have been a real estate appraiser in California for a long time. The last couple of years has been tough just because they're trying to correct the economy and nobody wants to double their interest rate to refinance. But that being said, if you can do a week in a close radius, then you don't have to fly. But I also have goals where I'm going to specific places. So I'm trying to also, it took me 5 years to see a game at every FBS stadium. I'm now trying to work on the FCS. I'm at 78 of 128, and you're going to a lot of places that are out of the way. And so in those cases, you're going to fly. But really, in the ideal world, you're going to do a lot of driving. But it's a combination of both. And like I said, the schedule dictates where you're going to go. In June, they announced the kick times for the first 3 weeks, so you can figure out which games are at noon and which games are at 7. But after that, they have what's called the 12-day and the 6-day rule, where the networks are going to hold the kick times to try to put the best games on in prime time. And so it's good because, you kind of have a little bit of anticipation of where you're going to go. But you guys know November, December is the most expensive time to book flights. So it works both ways. But really, it's just, you roll with the punches. You can come out with an initial plan for the first 3 or 4 weeks and then, see where the schedule takes you.
So when it comes to scheduling these games, is this something that you look at the season before, you're planning all this stuff ahead of time, or is it very much like kind of on the cusp of every other week?
Yeah. So you have multiple agendas after a while. So right now I'll give you one that there was a lot of schools that I went to during COVID where there were no fans. And I try to take really good stadium photos. And when I go through my phone and I look and I see, I was at Auburn and I see 20% capacity. I was at North Carolina at the time. The governor was only allowing 7% capacity. So those are ones I'm trying to go back to. A place like North Carolina, you got Duke, you got NC State, you got North Carolina, all within a close radius of each other, so you can hit multiples there. But other places like Boise, for example, you can't go to 2-for-1 for those. So it's a combination of how do you want to do it? Last year, I wanted to hit as many games as possible to try to set a record. So there are places like Tennessee I could not go to because you can't do a 2-for-1 for Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Maine is an FCS. That's a 1-by-1. But this year it will be, I don't think you can do both. I don't think you can set a record and go to your goals. So I already have, lightweight threatening comments that people are going to beat my record. Go for it. Okay. It's not a big deal. But we did it once. And, if I ever have to do it again, I think I could do it again.
So last season, I think I remember a couple of your posts, you were like parked out in a lot and you were like sleeping in the car overnight. Was that legit?
That's legit. I only stayed at 2 hotels the entire year. And wow. when I mentioned about not being a rich person, so the way I tell people is, okay, you can there's 13 weeks in a season. Okay. You could go and have very nice accommodations, stay at a Holiday Inn or whatever, however high you want to go and go to 13 games. I want to go to a lot of games. And if you go to 90 games in a 4-month period and a hotel is $150, I mean, do the math. You're talking about $10,000, $12,000. And so I joke, whatever rental car I get, I put the word hotel in front of it. So Hotel Camry, Hotel Jeep Cherokee, and it sucks. It sucks. But at the same time, a football game gets out at 11 p.m. Yeah, and if you have a flight at 5:30 p.m. the next day and say it's an hour and a half drive to the airport, what's the point of getting a hotel? There is no point. So, the choice is when you land, scope out the airport, try to see, hey, does this airport have in the common areas a good place to sleep? Is it quiet? Are they playing Christmas music all night? Those sort of things. And then, I went to a couple games in Montana and Idaho, and it's like -2, and I'm trying to, so I call it #glamour life, which is sarcastic for, hey, you see me at all these games and it looks cool, but it's whack-a-mole. Everything in between is, sleeping in a car. I've I joke that your water bottle becomes your bathroom, right? So those are things like that you throw out. But I wouldn't change it. I wish that I had a hotel sponsorship. That would be amazing. But I would rather go to more games than sleep comfortably in a hotel bed.
So I guess kind of going on that, like whenever you started out, what gave you the motivation to keep going? Because again, that's not, like you said, it's not the glamour lifestyle. Like sleeping in your car all the time, driving all this way, flying all the time. Like what gave you the motivation to kind of make this what it is now?
It's a couple things. Number one is, social media, the reciprocation you get from people. All of a sudden you're meeting people and forming friendships, and people want you to come, and then they're getting attached to your goals. Hey, how many can you hit? Can you do that? So that was one. Another thing is, I'm a man, and testing yourself is part of being a man. And so, you could stay in your comfort zone and you go to your local grocery store and go to your gym and all that stuff, or you can go out to all these places. And, I call college football travel the vessel. And what I mean by that is, you go to a game, like I go to University of Hawaii a lot because I live in California. It's a cheap flight over there. You're going to go to Hawaii for 3 or 4 days and the football game's only 4 hours. Well, then you have the opportunity to go to the beaches and hike Diamond Head and check out historical places. So really, it's been I don't want to use the excuse, but it's been the reason that I've been able to go and check out all kinds of historical sites and meet all different types of people. So those things, just, having a goal, wanting to stick to it, expand my horizons, meet people from all different backgrounds. And the other thing I tell people, there's no college football culture in California. We're very pro-centric. It's the Warriors, it's the Lakers, it's the Dodgers, it's the 49ers. Yeah. And so nobody cares about Stanford football or San Jose State football. It's unfortunate. So my whole life, seeing programs in Texas and in the South and SEC, you want to know if that's a real thing. And so that was part of what I wanted to do is the Grove in Oxford, is that really that crazy? The Penn State whiteout, is it really lit? So all those things were my motivation to keep going with this.
Last year, correct me if I'm wrong, you said you had 90 games, right?
Yeah, 90 games.
90 games. Is that like an official record? Like, did Guinness reach out to you and be like, "Hey, we're going to sign you up as a world record"?
So I applied to Guinness Book of World Records, and it's a 12 weeks to get a response, or $800 to get a response in five days. And I didn't want to spend $800, but I'm a little worried because they don't have a college football category. They don't even have an NFL category. So the category that I checked was most football matches, which I think of match as a soccer game. So in the fine print, it says the Guinness Book reserves the right to assign you a different title. So we'll see. I mean, the thing that is working in my favor, it's all on social media. But I didn't apply beforehand. I don't necessarily have a selfie of me at the game. I take photos in a certain style that I think people would know that it's me, but it just wasn't an intentional goal. And then it became a goal. So I applied. I think it's a record. I haven't had anybody come up and say, "Hey, campus tour guy, you're lying. I did 97. It hasn't happened yet, but we'll see. It's more of like, people know that I did it. Whether I'm going to get credit in the book, that's to be determined.
Hey, man, I mean, if you can't get credit for attending the games, you might be able to break a record for how many parking lots you slept in over the past season.
I guarantee you I've slept in the most rest areas that the cell phone parking lots. What's the ultimate is I'm not going to stay in the hotel, but I'll stay in the hotel parking lot, right?
So when it comes to sleeping in a parking lot, do you have to give these guys hey, by the way, you're going to have a car out here. It's just me. I'll leave in the morning. Or do you kind of just wing it and hope nobody comes and kicks you out?
Yeah, I just wing it. So, there's sometimes where you're tired and for me, my legs start to shake a little bit. I start to rub the back of my head. I can feel it. And so sometimes I just got to pull over and take a break. Yeah. I set 12 alarms wherever I go, just in case. You make it to the airport, you go through TSA, and then you're in the gate. You hope don't fall asleep in the gate. And so you set your alarm right before you're about to board. And so those are the things. But really, you're not supposed to sleep in a hotel parking lot. They have security that goes around a lot of times. But the first thing I do when I rent a car is I look for a tinted window. That's what I'm looking for. So try to cock it back, sleep for a couple hours. But, it's an unhealthy lifestyle, which is why I'm glad it's only for 3 or 4 months. I started out the season 11 pounds heavier than what I ended, and it's from under eating and lack of sleep. So I really, the season ended January 8th. Today is February, beginning of February. It's been about 2 or 3 weeks for me to actually get energy and feel like myself again. So, but to answer your question, they don't want you there. And so you just kind of, the saying is act like you belong, and you belong. And I just try to belong.
Nice.
So I guess whenever you're traveling, like you do, how often are you at home? Because like you said, you went to 90 games this year. That's not spending a whole lot of time at home.
No.
So I guess, how often are you at home in comparison, like now when you're in off season for football?
Yes. So from October 4th until November 25th, I was home one day. It was 44 out of 45 days on the road. And part of the reason is, so living in California, it's way away from most college football programs. If you look at the map, everything Texas East is probably about 80% of college football. So if you're going to a game on a Saturday night, let's say in Alabama, you're going to fly home Sunday. You're probably not going to get home Sunday till 4 or 5 p.m. And then say there's a Tuesday game at App State in Boone. You can't leave Tuesday morning from Oakland, California, and make it to Boone by kickoff 7 p.m. So you got to leave Monday, maybe let's say 6 or 7 p.m., take the red eye, get there Tuesday morning. So do you want to fly home for 20 hours, or would you rather just stay on the road in your rental car and bounce around, or take a closer flight? So I found myself doing that all through that period. In the beginning of the year, when they have less weeknight games, then you can go home, let's say Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then fly back out on a Thursday. But yeah, especially going for the record this year, I've never really gone serious after bowl games, because I enjoy on campus home versus road much more than 6-6 teams at the the Pop-Tart Bowl. But this year we were trying to prove a point. But to answer your question, right now I'm home and trying to reacclimate myself and see my family. I know we got spring football coming up. I've kind of thrown out a little bit of a balloon about Canadian Football League. If you're a sicko, you want to go to all these things. But right now I'm trying to stay home and get myself feeling good again.
So you already broke a record last season. Going into this season, this year, do you have any goals or things you're trying to reach?
So I already believe that I've been to the most FCS stadiums out of anybody. I've been to 78 out of 128. So that leaves 50. Last year I did 17 new ones. And so 50 divided by 3 is 17 per year. So I think if I were to do 17 new FCS schools for the next 3 years, I would not only be the only person to ever attend a game at all 128 FCS schools, but that also would mean that I've been to a game at all 261 Division I schools, because FCS is also Division I. So there are two goals together. And that's when we were talking about earlier about you may not be able to set the games record and go after that at the same time, because a lot of these schools are in the Northeast. And what happens in the Northeast is two things. Number one is it gets cold, and so they don't play night games, let's say after October 1st. So you can't do the 2-for-1 Saturdays because everybody's playing at 12 or 1. And then the other thing is a lot of them don't have lights. So they may not even play a night game all year. And when you're looking at FBS teams to 2-for-1 with in the Northeast, you got UConn, you got UMass, you got Army, you got Rutgers, got Boston College. There's not very many up there. So that's the challenge to doing it. But really, there's one team that got moved up to FBS this year. That's Kennesaw State in Conference USA. I've never been a game there, so I'm going to go there. But and as I mentioned earlier, going back to some of these COVID places I've never been. The number one that I get chirped at is to go to Tennessee, Knoxville. I've never been to a game there with 108,000 people. Actually, 2 years ago when they beat Alabama and threw the goalposts in the Tennessee River, I was at I was at a doubleheader, Long Island and Fordham, and it was the most FOMO I ever had in my entire life. So sometimes, I'll tell people, I'll be like, hey, this weekend, let me go check a couple boxes and I'll see you guys next week. And, I try to make it entertaining and fun. But, when you're at a small FCS school and you got Notre Dame at Ohio State, just, it doesn't matter how many followers you have. People want to see the bigger games. So, but I try to mix it up because you can't go to all big games because then the small schools don't think you're going to come. And you can't go to the small schools all the time because even though people say they want you to, they don't respond to it on social media. So you got to mix it up. And fortunately, you guys are a G5 school. G5 schools play a ton of weeknight games. So I've been to G5 more than anywhere else. So it's a balance of everything.
So I guess kind of diving more into game day atmosphere kind of things, like going back now, FCS and FBS, kind of what are some of the best places you've been? I guess one FBS and one FCS school.
So I always say it's like Baskin Robbins. Like, what flavor do you like? Meaning, do you like the 100,000 crazy people like Kyle Field at Texas A&M? I went to 2018. It was #1 Clemson at unranked Texas A&M. Kelly Bryant was alternating with Trevor Lawrence. He was a freshman. Came in that game. He threw his first pass for a touchdown, but he couldn't get it going. And Texas A&M, that 12th man is a legit thing. They have cadets on the field throwing up arm signals to the crowd, is all coordinated. And they gave Clemson everything they wanted. It was 28-26. And if they got a 2-point conversion, they would have gone to overtime. And talent-wise, they had no business staying. But that atmosphere, that, the coordination and just the sheer energy of the crowd, it really carried them. So Kyle Field, Texas A&M is one. I always talk about App State, Boone, North Carolina, Kid Brewer Stadium. I call it Field of Dreams because, you drive up the mountains and then all of a sudden there's a stadium where you wouldn't think it was. Same premise as the movie, but the seating capacity for that stadium is 30,000. And 2 years ago, they averaged 37,000. They have this grass hill, standing room only, no cell phone service, nothing. Like, there's nothing that works up there. But it is just insanity. They're working on expanding the stadium right now, but that's a place that I highly recommend to people. And then at FCS school, they call Montana, Washington Grizzly, they call it the Mecca of FCS. They have a 26,000 seat stadium. There's a big mountain with a white M that's a trail looking down on the field. And you just go there and, it's like a spiritual awakening place. And, everybody talks about them. They should go up to FBS and they should do that. They have such a special thing up there. And, it's hard to recruit against all these big Texas schools when you're in Missoula. So, but those are 3 ones where the big ones, you're just going to go there and you're part of the event. And then as you go down, you get more personal interaction and almost satisfaction being there because, you can interact with people and see, they can tell you what makes their place so special.
As the seasons have progressed, especially on your Twitter account, like a big claim to fame that you've been sort of becoming known for, especially like you've got a huge account, ESPN hosts, like retweeting some of your stuff, is basically taking photos in front of pylons and in front of just obstructions where it's a seat, you can actually pay for it, but you're not going to get any kind of view. What kind of got you to start going to Avery Stadium and looking for these obstructed views?
Yeah, so we all know historically places like Fenway Park and Wrigley Field, these older stadiums, they built them and the way they built them was different because they had to put these support beams everywhere. Well, every stadium in the SEC was built prior to 1940 except for Kentucky Stadium. Kroger Field was built in 1975. So we have a lot of that same thought process, old architecture in college football. 2019, I went to a game at Wyoming. They have what's called the knot hole, and it's a little spot where the press box sticks out, and then there's a seat there, and you only can see about 20 yards of the field. I did that in 2019, and people liked it. But in 2022, I went to a MACtion game at Western Michigan, and there was this little 2-seat bleacher next to a brick wall, and I had someone get behind me and take a photo from behind and, getting the back of my head looking onto the field. In that first person perspective, it not only painted a picture for people, but it also confused people a lot because they were like, is that you, or did you sneak up on this person? Do they know that they can move and they don't have to sit there? And so, I just called it obstructed view alerts. And, like you mentioned, ESPN picked it up, Barstool picked it up, Bleacher Report picked it up. And then it just started to become a thing. And this year, the very first game I went to was week 0 at USC. And in 2018, they did a couple-year renovation where they reduced the capacity at the Coliseum from 92,000 to 77,000, and they put in a press box. Well, stadiums is kind of a weird thing because they like the symmetry of the seats remaining and going all the way up against the press box, even if they're not going to be able to see the game. And so I knew about the seat for a couple of years, and I was trying to get some help, and a buddy of mine, I saw him, he tweeted himself holding a beer at the game, and I didn't know he was there, and I messaged him. I was like, I need your help, right? And so he comes up, and we go to the seat, and he takes this photo from behind me, and I look at it, and I'm like, this thing is about to go crazy on Twitter. And I put it out there, and it was like, I assign a percentage to the view. So a football field's 100 yards. So if you can only see 20 yards, it's a 20% view. Well, that one was like 4%. I'm like 4%, buyer beware, all this. And it just, I think it was like 18 million views, and it went crazy. And, I started out the season with 16,000 followers. And right now I think I'm like 36, 37. I would say 75% of that is from obstructed views, which is interesting now because when I post regular stadium photos or something that's not obstructed view related, I'll get comments and people will say, yeah, what about obstructed views? I'm like a one-trick pony now, but now it's my responsibility. So I'll get to the game as soon as the stadium opens, 2 hours early. I'm walking around before I go to the stadium. There's a website. It's called A View from Your Seats, and people use that when they're buying tickets to see, is this a good vantage point? So it's almost like scouting your opponent, and the stadium is your opponent. And it's funny because in the beginning, schools took it really personally, like you're trashing their stadium. But as time went and they saw that these existed everywhere, and I was doing 3 or 4 per week, all of a sudden you don't get as butthurt as before. But it's been an evolution, and I put out a calendar because people ask for it, so it's pretty wild. It's a little phenomenon.
So going to FBS and FCS schools, what do you see as the big difference between an FCS atmosphere versus an FBS atmosphere?
It's the resources, it's the quality of play, it's the it's the what's on the line. So I like the FCS because there's a 24-team playoff. Every conference champion gets an automatic bid. They have all the playoff games are at home except for the championship. But, they could have playoff games where the students are gone on break in the winter. And I went to University of Albany, and we're talking like, 40 degrees on a Saturday at noon when the kids are on break. You're not going to get that, sold out crazy atmosphere. So that's the downside, that you could have a great game. It could be very consequential, but just timing wise, weather wise. 2 years ago, I went to the South Dakota State semifinal. It was the coldest sporting event in the history of South Dakota. It was -6 degrees at kickoff, and it just got worse from there. And so, we see all the FBS and the college football playoff. They're all in domes, and they're all that. So the different with FCS, sometimes you can tell. I hate to use the words small time, but it's not what we see on a week in and week out basis with Power 5 football. And then FBS football is great, but when we have, fortunately they're expanding the playoff this year, but when we have 133 teams in FBS and we're putting in 4, and you have somebody like Florida State going 13-0 and not getting in the playoff because their quarterback got hurt. My dad threw out an example to me. He said, what if Alabama was 11-0, Jalen Monroe got hurt, and Saban went and won his rivalry game against Auburn and then won the SEC championship without a backup quarterback, and then they said, sorry, you're not in because you don't have your start. Like, the whole college football world would have just, gone haywire. So those are the kind of things where we have to deal with a lot more politics in the bigger schools, or in the bigger FBS, but hopefully that will be changed. So I get a lot more personal interaction, friends, tailgate opportunities when I go to the smaller schools.
Mhm.
But when you're at the bigger schools, you're part of it could be a legendary event, and you look forward to that as well.
And I guess kind of seeing the FCS as well. Oh, sorry, Jimmy.
No, go to you.
So do you feel there's more of a personal connection to the team? Because like the FBS schools, you have people from all over the country that are fans of that school. But like at an FCS school, you're going to see a lot of like they have a personal connection to that school and they have a personal want for them to do well. Do you see that a lot more with FCS versus an FBS school?
I do, but also there's a lot of entitlement in FBS, Power Five. Like I went to a game 2 years ago where Kansas State beat Oklahoma in Oklahoma. And you looked at the crowd and the students, they're like, how dare they beat us? Like, they're not even allowed to do that, And so when you go to, in G5s, they would count in the same category. We had Liberty go to they were the New Year's Six representative. They played at Oregon and they got whooped, and you could see the talent level difference. But those are the ones where you go to a game at Liberty, you're going to meet individual people. They're going to tell you that they travel to all the road games. They're a donor here. They know this person. So it's more of, I would say, appreciation. And that's the thing. So I will have people who say, we don't care about you going to Presbyterian College, or we don't care about you going to Stetson or whatever. But when I get DMs from coaches, thank you so much for shedding a light on us and spotlighting us, then to me, like, I will tell you, one of the most satisfying things for me is when I look through the ESPN scoreboard on the games on Saturday, I don't just look at 20 games. I look at all of FBS. I look at all of FCS, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, UAPB upset FAMU. It could be something like that. Yeah. And it's just because I've been there. So I just think that there's appreciation. Even have South Dakota State. They were the little brother to North Dakota State forever. And they finally slayed them. They've won the last 2 national championships in FCS. And now all of a sudden they're the big brother. So, but that's what you see mainly.
I'll say this much, man. Like, especially the past few years, when you look at the AP polls, whenever they come out, there's like certain voters, you can tell they didn't watch any games. They maybe watched the top 2 games, and then they've got these other teams that are, P5 teams still up in their rankings, but they haven't won anything yet. It's obvious they haven't watched anything. I'm just saying, shout out, if you're responsible for getting voters, Michael's your guy, man.
I'll try to help. I will tell you that, being from California and having the Pac-12 disband this year, on the heels of maybe their best season in the last 20 years, it goes to exactly what you're talking about. Because if you trash a conference for 10, 15 years, and then that conference tries to go get a TV contract, what do you think the executives are going to have? Nobody watches your games. You guys are on late. You don't get into the playoffs, blah, 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 blah. Well, okay, it fulfilled its prophecy, and there's no more Pac-12. Now, the best teams joined the Big Ten, and, that's going to be a crazy thing. But college football is about diversity and having different choices. And I think people are going to regret what happened. And I think there is going to be some reincarnation of the Pac-12 in some way, maybe in the next 8 to 10 years. I don't know how it looks, but it's tough because, I'll give you another example. There's no reason Michael Penix should not have won the Heisman. He was an undefeated quarterback on the number 2 team in the nation. They beat 6 ranked teams. They had like a 21-game winning streak, and they gave it to Jalen Daniels, who had great numbers, but he went 0-3 against ranked teams, and they didn't make anything. He didn't even play in this bowl game. So you've had other instances where Bryce Young or all you got to do is be an undefeated quarterback on a playoff team, and you're almost guaranteed the Heisman. And because of the lack of respect for Pac-12 West Coast football, you got a guy like Michael Penix who beat Texas down in the South in the semifinal, and none of that is good enough. So it's tough, but it's exactly what you're talking about. If you're 60 years old and you go to bed at 10 Eastern, well, guess what? All the games on the West Coast start at 7 Pacific, and you're not going to see any of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's sort of like my worry going into the next few years of college football is it seems like it's becoming more pro, and essentially, within the next 5 years, 10 years, at the rate we're going, you're going to have this Premier League where it's just the Big Ten, the SEC, and everybody else. And I think, that's something that, as far as like the spirit of college football, the rivalries, that sort of more intimate feeling, that's something where maybe the FCS is really going to start to shine a lot more. But from your experience seeing college football evolve over the past few years, is that something that you're kind of worried about, over the next few years happening, or is there something that you think is going to be corrected where they're going to realize, crap, we overcorrected, we're making this too much like the NFL, we got to break this down again and go back to almost like the BCS era?
I think we should definitely be worried. I think you purposely have to have blinders on right now to go with the college is more pure and this and that. You look at the way the coaches in just cutthroat ways left their programs, and Saban retires and DeBoer takes Washington to the national championship and he goes to Alabama, and then Jed Fish took Arizona to one of the best years they've had in a long time and he leaves and go to Arizona, and all they do is they already have the coaching change announced before they even get to address their team. And, and then you got players, they get criticized because they're transferring, but they signed up to be with this coach and he leaves. Yeah. And so I always tell people, if you want to hold on to your love for college football, concentrate on the fans in the stadiums, because the fans are going to be there 40, 50 years. And the stadiums are going to be there forever, unless, you want to do something to, as I mentioned, every SEC stadium was built before 1940. So they go on. But I don't know what it is. I grew up a pro football fan. I grew up a 49ers fan. I mean, Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, all those guys. And living in Northern California, we lost the Raiders twice, once to LA and once to Las Vegas. The Oakland A's are leaving and they're going to Las Vegas as well. The Golden State Warriors have been in Oakland forever. They got taken across the bay to San Francisco. The Niners were in San Francisco. They got taken to Santa Clara. And when I talk about, Alabama, you're not going to hear a story where if they don't improve the stadium, Bryant-Denny Stadium, that Alabama is going to move the university from Tuscaloosa to Mobile. Like, you're not going to hear those things. Yeah. So that's part of the reason I got disenfranchised with pro football, was because of the disloyalty. And, you read these stories and this guy beat his wife and this guy got a DUI and all that stuff. So I used to say, we don't have to deal with that in college football. But now with all these coaching changes and the money and everything, it's seeping in. So I don't know what is going to correct it, but I definitely think it's a problem. And what we're saying now about what we love about it, we may not even have that to hang on to in the near future. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think everyone should be relatively concerned. But again, interact with your fellow fans, go have fun at the game, support your team, love the stadium, promote that. You will preserve the best parts of college football. Hopefully everything else will shake out.
100%. So go into as many football games as you have you been, like, kind of what's your favorite rivalry game that you've been to, or biggest kind of prime time game that you've gotten to see that you were just like blown away by?
So again, it's a bunch of them that, I went to Alabama LSU, and that was in 2017. I got to see Jalen Hurts right there do his thing. That was amazing. On a lower scale, I've seen App State and Coastal Carolina just absolutely want to kill each other year after year. I went to App in 2021, and Coastal beat them and rushed the field. And then the next year in Conway, App beat that, vice versa. And so those are great. The Holy War in Utah between BYU and in Utah, that's a crazy one. And then the Georgia and Alabama, I'm going to bring up those two SEC championship games in back-to-back years where Jalen Hurts or Tua threw that pass in overtime and beat him. And then Jalen Hurts came in and relieved Tua in the SEC championship the year after. Those are two of the best football games I ever watched. And then I went to the 2021 national championship where Georgia finally slayed the beast and beat Alabama. So love those. And, some people, they don't like dynasties and they don't like the big teams. In college football, you got to love those, because those are Kirby Smart and Dabo Sweet. They're all recruiting to beat Alabama. And you like that. It's an arms race. So, those are the kind of ones that jump out to me.
It's kind of interesting when you hear, I hear you talk about the Holy War, because that's not one you get, like, you hear talked about, especially down here and on the kind of the East Coast side. You don't hear that a whole lot. So it's kind of interesting to hear you say the Utah BYU game, because it's just like, that's not what we hear about. We hear about, like you said, the Georgia Alabama, the Texas Oklahoma, like, you don't, and Bedlam in Oklahoma State. You don't hear about really the West Coast rivalries over here.
No, and when you go to Utah, they have I can't remember what the name of the highway is, but you got Utah State, you got Weber State, you got Utah, and you got BYU, and they're all 2 hours apart, right on the same thing. They all have really scenic, beautiful mountain stadiums, and California athletes are all over the place. So if you think of the best high school recruit hotbeds, you're talking Texas, you're talking Florida, and you're talking California. Well, California is not doing a very good job of retaining their players. So all of a sudden there's a ton of them at Oregon. There's a ton of them at Utah. There's a ton. So you're getting really good players in places that you wouldn't think. And then, you just BYU, nobody wanted to put them in a conference because of their religious beliefs. And then they finally got accepted to the Big 12, and then Utah wasn't going to join, and they're in. But when you travel, you get in the weeds in some of these rivalries, and it just makes you buy into them more. And so, Utah, Salt Lake City is only about an hour north of Provo, but the lifestyle that you have in those two places, they could not be more different. But yeah, I went to a game at it's called the Black Hills Rivalry. It was a Division II. South Dakota Mines and Black Hills State. That's the fourth most played rivalry in college football, only behind Lehigh Lafayette, Yale. I think it's Yale, Harvard, and Yale, Columbia, or something. That was a crazy place. Yeah, they had a stadium that you could park 350 cars around it, and they can sit there and tailgate during the game, and they honk their horns, and this is crazy. So those are the kind of things all of a sudden you're like, man, Black Hills rivalry has been played more than Alabama, Auburn. So yeah, you get to see more things, and you'll bring up kind of oddball answers in national interviews like this.
That's pretty cool.
So obviously obstructive views is something that you hit on a lot. And over the past few years, a lot of people complain about different things in college football stadiums, whether it's the price of beer or, the bleacher seats. What's one thing that you would say is a predominant issue in most stadiums that should be fixed as soon as possible?
Parking is terrible. I hate parking. Yeah. That's the bane of my existence. And, so we talk about things like, how can you save money, like sleep in cars and don't do hotels. I refuse to pay for parking. I've been to Penn State. I walked 2.5 miles to my car. And, sometimes it's even better to park at a Walmart 5 miles away and take an Uber and go there. But, in some places, they may have never planned to have this many people descend on a place all at the same time. And, all of a sudden the enrollment of the university goes up, and then the prestige of the program goes up. And then you got, 80,000 people descending on a town. I mentioned App State. I think the town population is 18,000, and they average 37,000 a game. And, wow. So you get these problems. I can think of specifically, it's about an 1.5 hour drive to Raleigh for, I had a flight, and I got stuck in the parking garage there for about 2 hours. I couldn't even get out of the garage. And so parking is the number one thing. It's a way for people to be opportunistic, try to, I never want to pay more for my parking than I do for my ticket. And that comes up all the time. So I try to plan it in the same way that I'm scouting the stadium to look for obstructive views. I'm scouting the surrounding area. Maybe it's 14 minutes away, but it's an easy walk, whatever you have to do. But I would say we all know concessions are high. We all know ticket prices are too high, but just the inconvenient, I made that Drake meme where I forget the video, but it's him doing one this is okay, and then this is the good one. And so I put the parking at the stadium to be close to the game is like an okay answer, but parking far from the stadium so you don't have to deal with traffic on the way out of the game, right, that's the real thing to do. So, but parking to me is just they take advantage of you. They know they have more money and they can extract it from you, and that's not fair.
Hey man, I mean, I guess if you're sleeping in your car, they can't tow you, right? You'll know.
Well, I will tell you the nightmare scenario is to walk back to your car, have it towed, and then you have a flight at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you have to decide between your rental car or your flight. And I haven't had to deal with that yet, but I'm scared of that every single time.
So as somebody who I've never really slept in my car overnight much. There was a week during my undergrad where there was a leak in my dorm. They had to rip it apart, and so I slept in my car at a Flying J, and it was probably the most miserable week of my life. And I hope I never have to do it again. For you, what was the worst experience you've had when it comes to arriving to a stadium, having to sleep there, and then go to the game the next day?
It takes a while to get used to sleeping in the car. There's no way to say, you just go in there and you pop your nightlight on and you drink a little tea. But it doesn't work like that, So I remember when I was trying to learn how to do it, and I was in Seattle, and I just assumed I could sleep in the trunk and pop down the back seat. And I laid there, and it was a Saturday night, and there was some festival going on town, and just loud noises and everything. I didn't sleep 1 second at all. And I'm 6'3". I've tried to sleep in the back seat, and you just if you're sprawled out on your own bed, who's to say that you're just all going to sudden cram into the back seat of a car and be a pretzel and just fall asleep comfortably? So really it took a lot of time. The truck stops you're talking about, I could be a college football account. I could be a truck stop account. I could be a convenience store. I could be a grocery store account. I could be a Planet. But I tell people the hack that I have the most is Planet Fitness. Okay, so $24 a month, you can get a Planet Fitness membership. You can go to any Planet Fitness in the country. They're open 24 hours a day. So if you want to work out, you can do it after the game. They have shower facilities. So if you can't shower somewhere, you don't get a hotel, you can at least shower there. They got free Wi-Fi, so you can use that. And if you park close enough, you can actually use it from your car and still get the Wi-Fi. And then the major hurdle, we talked about earlier, do people mess with you when you're parking? Well, if you find a business that's open 24 hours a day and you park there, people are going to just think you're an employee or something. They don't do that. So that's my little, I think Planet Fitness should sponsor me, to be honest with you. And I put that out there because I give them a lot of free promotion. But there have been several times where, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm trying to sleep, and you just have to make the decision of what are you going to do? And the ideal thing, and it will sound crazy, the ideal thing is to sleep from 2 to 4 and then go to the airport, get through TSA, just stumble your way through and get on your flight at 6 o'clock. Sleep on your flight, even though, again, being 6'3" and it being uncomfortable, if you're tired, you'll sleep. And then when you hit the ground, it's like a pinball. You get shot out and you get energy and you try to do it over and over. When you do it 70, 80 times, then that's when your health gets compromised, you lose 11 pounds and all that. But it's for you to just be displaced for a week out of your apartment and to have to go suffer at Flying J's. It sucks. Okay. It sucks. I mean, no grown man wants to do this, but hey, again, until we're sponsored and, whoever wants to put me up, I'm going to do it. So,
hey man, at the rate you're going, you've got so many things lined up. I mean, if you don't want to do college football anymore, like you said, you can just start a sleeping in your car podcast, and I'm sure you get a ton of views.
Well, Buc-ee's is the number one. Yeah, Buc-ee's. We don't have Buc-ee's in California, but those places are incredible. I feel very safe sleeping in those parking lots.
So the biggest, being obviously Meeting Nation, having most of our followers UTSA based, the question everyone's wondering is, how do you rate the Alamo Dome? And so feel free to be as brutally honest as you want. I know, Charles Barkley is a big fan of San Antonio. And so, and a lot of people, even within our fan base, are always egging us on about how, we should be having our own on-campus stadium. And I think for myself, at least, and I know a few other people believe this too, is just that UTSA's rise and our success in football, a lot of it is because of the Alamo Dome, is because of the fact that we're playing in a stadium that has the capacity for 65,000 people. And so in events where we're playing a team like Texas State and we have everyone from San Marcos coming in or what have you, you have a very high ceiling. And so obviously Alamo Dome, very, very dated, used to be home to the Spurs. Now primarily, UTSA is playing there. We're very fortunate, obviously, to have the city renovate it whenever there's like the Final Four and stuff. But from your experience with the Alamo Dome, what are some of your favorite aspects of it? What are some of your least favorite aspects of it? And if you were given like an unlimited budget and you were able to sort of like go in there and renovate it, what would you do to make it the stadium you'd want to be in?
So I always bash off-campus stadiums. I bash dome stadiums, and the reason is because you're not gonna get that authentic college football appeal. But there are exceptions, and exceptions number one is a young program. A young program, it's kind of the chicken and the egg. Okay, hey, we want a great stadium and we want a great on-campus experience. Build it for us. And what do people say? Well, are you going to have a successful team? Are people going to come? Well, we can't guarantee that. Well, then we can't give you that. So what are you going to do? You got to go make the best of the situation. Now, you got places like USF and Temple and Pitt, and they're playing in NFL stadiums. UNLV allowed the Raiders to have them agree to not let anyone use Sam Boyd Stadium until 2030. Okay, no one can use it, and they get $1 million a year from the Raiders, and they still have to pay $275,000 per game for operating costs to use Allegiant Stadium. So when you go to Allegiant Stadium, nothing says UNLV. There's no parking. There's nothing. Okay, so you had XFL teams that wanted to play in Las Vegas and use Sam Boyd. Non-compete, can't do it. So you got Temple, they go play at the Link in Philadelphia. They get like 4,000 people in a 65,000 seat stadium. It looks horrible. So there are plenty of things out there that are way, way worse arrangements than what UTSA has. But what you're talking about is, first of all, if you go tailgate at a big game at UTSA, it is a fun environment. I went there for the 2022 Conference USA Championship game. I think it was against North Texas. And that was one of the most fun, and San Antonio is a fun city. I grew up in San Diego, and San Diego has a lot of parallels, at least to me, and feel of San Antonio. So you get that environment. When you see the dome lit up at night, it's really cool. You have parking. There's an abundance of parking, whether you do it in the neighborhoods, whether you do it right there. And I don't have to tell you guys about the heat in San Antonio, and to have a place like that is a professional venue that hosts bowl games, that has hosted, championship games. It's a real asset to have. And so I went to my first 2 UTSA games in 2020. I went to 2 of them that year. And I remember they opened the upper deck, and I explored, and I went up there, and there was just a camera set up at the 50-yard line because somebody was recording. And there was not one person up in the upper deck. And there's an account called Empty Seats. I think, I forget, you could tag that. And so, but fast forward that, after Coach Traylor came in and got some momentum, and, Frank Harris and what you guys have been able to do, that game against North Texas, they opened up the upper deck, and I want to say at least one side of it was filled up. So we're talking about 40,000 people. And the passion that the fans have, I think there's a little bit, and you can speak on this more than I can. When you're in the shadow of Texas, and when you're in the shadow of, TCU and these bigger programs, and you get this momentum and you can build on it and get young students to come and drive and come off campus and go there, that's an amazing thing. So I would say, given the choices and the obstacles that UTSA has had, I think they've absolutely made the best of it and enhanced the Alamo Dome as much as possible. As far as alterations, I would say either leave the upstairs open all the time, or maybe just have a section of it assigned. But I would, last year we were talking about obstructed view photos. I snuck up to the upstairs and I took a photo behind the big curtain, and it was an obstructed view from back there. It was just like my ultimate bucket list thing to be able to do that. But, what I do like about the Alamo Dome is how close the bleachers are to the field. There are no obstructed views that I could find. The band is incredible. Where I went to the Frisco Bowl, you guys played, and your band stayed the whole time, and they were incredible there. So I'm talking a lot here, but I would say that, again, you guys have made the best of it. I think that the momentum, I don't know where it's going to lead, but you guys are on the right path to hopefully getting an on-campus stadium. And the only alteration, and I don't even want to say it's an alteration, because you're faced with the same problem. How can a G5, any G5, fill a 50 or 60,000 seat stadium on the regular? So I think you're doing the best you possibly can.
Nice. And wrapping it up, a couple more questions. When it comes to like your own favorite college football teams, and obviously it might have evolved over the past few years as you've gone to all these different events, who would you say right now is like your top favorite that you like have to see every season?
Every season. Well, I had a rule that I was going to go see Hawaii every season. And so 2017, 2018, 2019, I did. I just had this fascination with Aloha Stadium. They talk about the Hawaii test. The Hawaii test is, can you start the game at midnight and watch the whole thing without sleeping? And a lot of people can't do it. And so 2019, I went to the season opener. They played Arizona, and Arizona was ranked, and they had Khalil Tate, and they beat them. And then at the end of the year, they played in the Hawaii Bowl. It was against BYU, and you got to come back. You got to come back. And I'd been to 50 college football games, and I already had been to Hawaii, and, money is not absolutely flowing unlimited. And I was like, no good. I'm going to pass. Well, not only did they beat BYU, they got their first 10-win season in a long time. It was the last game ever played at Aloha Stadium. They condemned it afterwards. They call it the Rust Palace because the ocean water, the salt water dissolved it. It made it bad. And so now Hawaii, they don't have a stadium. They had an on-campus 4,000 seat track stadium, and they've tried to build it up to 9,000 and 17,000. And there's been talk about new Aloha Stadium in 2028 and all this stuff. So Hawaii has been my favorite because at first it was like this mythical place that I just wanted to see and discover for myself. Mm-hmm. But now I'm bought into the stadium situation and the politics aspect. And, you see Tua, you see Marcus Mariota, you see Mackenzie Milton, Tua's brother. There's some great play. And when you go to Hawaii, you see, St. Louis High School, and Timmy Chang is the head coach, and all these bucket list stadiums with ocean views. It's just a crazy, underrated football rabid state, and I'm totally bought into it. And so they have their spring game coming up. I'm not supposed to say the date because they haven't announced it, but I will be there. I went to Colt Brennan, passed away. I went to his ceremony where they put his ashes out in Waikiki Beach 2 years ago. So Hawaii is my de facto favorite. I went to school in San Diego. I grew up as a San Diego State fan, but I went to UC San Diego. They didn't have any sports. And so, but as I've traveled more, I've just had more of a connection with University of Hawaii.
Nice. And wrapping up, last question. Obviously, and this is something we ask most of our guests who aren't, I guess, directly UTSA affiliated, but with the way college football is going, obviously you being on the West Coast, sort of the breakdown of the Pac-12, a lot more of these games are going to be played, obviously, Central and in the East Coast. How do you see that affecting, I guess, on a broad scale, the fan experience? Then, as well as you're going to probably have to assume drive a lot more and fly a lot more out than just driving locally.
Yeah, well, I will tell you one. We talk about things that we've accomplished. I have a thing I haven't done, which I really want to do, which is watch a noon game on the East Coast or Central Time Zone, hit a plane and catch a late night game on the West Coast. That's my dream that I want to do. And so when we have all these teams that are West Coast teams and they're playing in different time slots and all that, the Big 12, they acquired UCF because they wanted, and now they have BYU. So now they got the Eastern Time Zone, the Midwest, and the Mountain. So I'm actually looking at it as more opportunities. That being said, I always tell people, so people love game day, right? And they love waking up. In California, game day starts at 9 a.m. And if you're a college student and you go out on a Saturday night, or actually, let me rephrase that. It starts at 6 a.m. Pacific, and then the games start at 9 a.m. So if you're a West Coast person and you're a college student, you go out on a Saturday night, what are the chances you're going to be coherent and wake up at 6 a.m. to watch game day? It just doesn't happen. So I think that in the same way that it's unfortunate that they're, kind of regionalizing college football, they're also steering it towards where their fan base is. And if we don't care about game day out here, well, they're going to take it to where game day is. When USC hosts game day, they started at 6 o'clock in the morning on the Sunday. So I think what will happen is you're just going to get more focus on the Big Ten and the SEC, and they're going to vulture Florida State, and they're going to vulture Clemson and North Carolina and Virginia Tech and cannibalize that. And, from a scheduling perspective, maybe we're going to have West Coast games at 10 a.m. and maybe you can do 2 or 3 in a day. It's possible, but it will be interesting to see. I still, even though there's no Pac-12, Washington went to the national championship. That's the West Coast doing good. Just because they happen to have a Big Ten logo, they're still a West Coast program. So we'll see, man. You don't want to be negative because there's always things to be worried about, but there will be college football. We'll be able to go to games. We'll be able to watch them on TV. We'll just have to roll with the punches.
Any predictions going into next season on who's going to win?
Well, it will be interesting to see if Alabama restocks. I didn't hate the Alabama dynasty. A lot of people don't like people that win all the time. I just respected how Saban did it, and so I will say this: I'm hoping that we don't have 5 SEC teams in the 12-team playoff. I love the fact that we're going to have first-round games on campus. I'm already dreaming about a snow game at Penn State or Michigan. Can you imagine? Let's get LSU going to play at Penn State with 100,000 people in the snow. All of a sudden, the SEC is not going to do as good as they think they're going to do. So those are the kind of things. But really, I think that we have the usual suspects, and it will be interesting to see because college football has always been a regular season sport. Ole Miss had a great year, but you go and you play Alabama, you lose, you can't go to the playoff. Well, now you get that loss and you can still go. I will tell you one thing I am worried about is if we get 12-0 Georgia against 12-0 Alabama in the SEC championship in a 12-game playoff, why play the game?
Yeah.
What's the incentive to go hard? Because you're in the playoff anyways, and you're probably not, so there's all kinds of obstacles. But I don't have any predictions, but I will say other than I think Georgia is going to reload, and we'll see if teams like Ohio State and Michigan can come at them. But more is better. FCS has 24 teams in the playoffs. We're getting 12 in the FBS. We got to be happy about that.
There you go. All right, guys. Well, that'll wrap up this episode of Median Nation. Michael, we really appreciate you coming on and taking your time out of your day to do this. And we hope to have you back again. And if you're ever in San Antonio, Alamo, give us a call. We'd love to share around.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you guys having me and invite. And as I said, the Alamo Dome is tied for my most games anywhere, 5. And, if I get another opportunity to go down there, it always seems like I always say I'm never going to go back to a place and then I'm back 4 weeks later. So hopefully that will happen again here. But I appreciate you guys letting me chat with you. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we'll need to work out a deal with the Alamo Dome to get you your own designated sleeping spot in the parking lot. So I
actually want to spend the night in the Dome. That's what I want to do.
Oh, there we go. Right in the middle of the field.
I almost got it at the Kibbe Dome. I went to the playoff game in Moscow a couple of weeks ago, and I had it past 2 levels of the administration approved it, and all of a sudden somebody got cold feet with liability. And I said, you guys have been playing football on this field for 50 years, and all I want to do is sleep on the field for 4 hours. What's going to happen? But anyways, that's the next thing. I want to sleep in the Dome. So let's see if we can make that happen.
There you go. Michael, how can people best follow you? Is it mostly on Twitter, on X, or?
So on Twitter at CFB Campus Tour, College Football Campus Tour. I'm also on Instagram, same thing. Website, cfbcampustour.com. I got an obstructed views calendar up there, $30. Working on some more merchandise and trying to get a podcast like you guys, and it's hard to build up things when you go on the road for 90 days or 90 games. So we're going to do a little off-season stuff. But I enjoy Twitter the most. It's the most conversational. You can meet people and do all that. So message me on Twitter, and hopefully I'll meet you guys, or anybody that messages me will meet up at a game.
Definitely. All right, guys. Well, that wraps up this episode. Appreciate y'all listening in, and we'll hope to have an episode next week or the week after. Maybe focus a bit on David, what he's got going on in golf, and bring some players on. But other than that, have a great week.